The African American Civil Rights Movement Nonviolent. Part 1. Rights. It's a powerful word. When you think of a right, you might think of the right to take a selfie, the right to choose your own clothes, or the right to watch Fortnite videos on YouTube. But during the Civil Rights Movement, blacks were trying to gain basic rights in the United States. There were conditions that needed to change. After Reconstruction ended, many of the rights that had been gained for African Americans in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, like the right for equal protection under the law and the right to vote, were taken away through laws and practices in the South. Jim Crow laws that segregated public places were a way of life in the South after the Supreme Court upheld separate but equal in Plessy v. Ferguson. Schools, movie theaters, parks, and lunchroom counters were segregated. While they were supposed to be equal, many times they were not. For example, a one-room high school without a gym and library in Macon, Georgia, was supposed to be equal to a fully equipped modern high school like ours in Wayzata. Additionally, African Americans faced unequal treatment under the law. Many local governments in the South, including mayor, city council, and police, enforced laws differently for blacks and whites in the same community. To stop African Americans from voting restrictions were put in place in the South. First, poll taxes were put in place. A poll tax is an amount of money that had to be paid in order to vote. Since many African Americans in the South were poor, many could not afford to vote. Literacy tests, which are reading and writing tests, were also used. Local voting registers varied the difficulty of literacy tests. For example, a white person might get a see Jane run kind of test, and an African American might get a section of the Constitution with no explanation or directions. Sometimes they also messed with voter registration by claiming that African Americans had filled out the application wrong. Some communities intimidated African Americans who wanted to vote by publishing the voters' name and addresses in the newspapers, making them a target for the KKK. The black community faced violence and physical intimidation to help maintain the status quo and keep whites in power. When blacks would attempt to vote or fight for their rights, the Ku Klux Klan and other white groups might burn crosses in their front yard or physically attack blacks. Some were even killed. There was also economic intimidation. Blacks involved in protests might be fired or denied loans.